could you go to English and unmute original?
Okay.
I'll get the recording going in the meantime.
English. Mute original? No.
Let's see. Yeah, mute original. That's right.
Mute original. Mute original audio. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes. And the YouTube is just about to start. I'm just going to wait for it to kick in and then we can have the first question.
Estoy esperando que empiece el video en YouTube y luego vamos con las preguntas.
Okay, so the first question and the second question also actually, but the first question is from Sri Radha from Brighton.
Sri Radha de Brighton.
Okay.
Hare Krishna, my humble obeisances, Maharaj. This is, I think it's a silly question, but it's a question
muy
I've often
estúpida,
wondered about.
pero una pregunta que he tenido durante mucho tiempo.
What I've noticed is
Lo que he
that
notado
animals
es que
come to
los
devotees,
animales,
and why they come, I'm wondering if this is their last journey before they move on.
se
I mean, in my
acercan a
home,
los
I've got a cat
devotos.
called Bolo,
Yo, por ejemplo,
and
tengo
I have
un gato
Prabhupada chanting all the time.
y tengo
And
Prabhupada
when I
cantando
stroke
todo el rato.
Bolo, he purrs away, but I chant Hare Krishna to him all the
Y
time.
cuando lo
And my
acaricio,
question is, I know it's silly, but my question is,
le
do
canto
they
los
come to
santos nombres.
devotees as
Entonces mi
sort of a
pregunta es,
moving on
¿será que los
before they
animales se acerquen, aparecen
into
en la vida de
maybe
los
a
devotos
human
porque es su
form?
última vida de
Is that
animales?
why they come to
Es
devotees?
por eso que
Tell you
se juntan.
a brief story. One day at
Una historia,
Audaria,
seguro, Maharaj.
I looked out
Un
the
día
window and there was a peacock
en
in the
Audaria
forest.
miré fuera de la ventana
And I
y
thought,
había
oh,
un
that's a
pavo real.
peacock in the
Yo
forest, you know.
pensé,
So
¿hay un pavo
I
real?
tried to follow him, and he went around
Traté de seguirlo,
the mountainside and so forth, and
se
he
fue
just stayed
por
near
las
the top.
montañas
And I
se
called a
quedó
couple of the
aquí
devotees and said, look, there's a
cerca de la
peacock
cumbre
out
de la
here.
montaña. Les dije a
And
los
then he
devotos, era un
came
pavo real.
onto the property. Well, he was on
Y
the
luego
property
se
at that time, but he came
acercó
onto the developed areas,
a
and
la
he's been
desarrollada
there
de
for
Audaria
15 years.
y ahí se ha quedado 15
Never goes
años.
anywhere. He's a
Nunca se va a
brahmachari.
ningún lado, es un brahmachari.
So, so you have to think about such animals
Entonces hay que
in
pensar en estos animales
light of
como
their
a
previous
la
lives and
luz
so forth.
de su
And so it is with all the devotees,
vidas anteriores, etc.
animals, I would say.
Y
There are some famous
todas las
animals
mascotas de los
in
devotos,
South India, famous
hay algunas
elephants
que son famosas, por ejemplo, en la India del
that
Sur,
involved with, or a famous elephant, I recall, involved with one of the Vishnu temples there. I forget all the details
no me acuerdo los
of that,
detalles.
but he it's obvious that he's a devotee. There are some famous birds. Where's that place?
Pero
Pakshi
creo que
Tirtha
está hablando del
must be.
elefante. También hay un pájaro
What
famoso.
is the story there? The birds come every year, two birds.
Hay dos
My memory's not so good
pájaros
now
que
these days.
vienen.
I can't recall, but anyway.
Paramananda is saying it's Paramananda is saying it's
dice
Guru
que
Vayur
es
temple.
Guru Vayur for the elephant, yeah. But there's Pakshi Tirtha where there's two birds that come
Tirtha es donde hay dos
every
águilas
year at a certain time.
que vienen cada
I
año.
forget the Leela for that, but it's connected to Vishnu and Vaishnavism and so forth. So anyway, there are many special instances of that, and and it says the cats and the dogs in the house of Srivas Thakur were liberated. Mentioned in Chaitanya Charitamrita. So I think we should look at it in that way. Certainly, they've taken birth as animals or birds or for whatever reason, but they have a past that enables them to connect with devotees. Another example that comes to mind, of course, is the whole of India, if you will, which is its secular name. Bharat is its original name for that landmass, subcontinent, after Maharaj Bharat, who left the world and entered the Himalayas, as we began, as a devotee, and pursued the solitude that the mountains provided, and the conducive nature that they provided for bhajan. But when he saw a deer crossing the river, chased by a tiger, and captured by the tiger, but giving birth, and the fawn was born motherless, then he naturally, out of compassion, took care of the fawn, but became distracted by the fawn, and of course fell to his death, preoccupied with the fawn. He took birth as a deer himself, but as a deer, deers have very good hearing, of course. So he positioned himself near, within the forest, near enough that he could hear the recitation of the Bhagavatam by sages. This was Bharat Maharaj. So he knew that he was who he was and how he got there.
Entonces se encariñó tanto
remember
que
from his previous life and so forth.
Al morir,
and after that, of course, he became born as Jad Bharat, and so the story goes. So there are many nice examples of this. So we should see that, that your cat will be born in a devotee, as a devotee, a human form, as a devotee, in his or her next life.
I've never had to look for a cat. They've always been given to me. So he sort of clicked on me once I came into Krishna consciousness, that they've been given by Krishna so that they can move on.
But this speaks to us about the efficacy, the power of bhakti. As I've often said and underscored, bhakti is governed by the nirguna, not by the tamaguna, rajaguna, or sattvaguna, the modes of nature, but by the transcendental atmosphere and influence of the Krishna's internal energy, whereas the material nature consists of the three gunas, tamas, rajas, and sattva. And so because bhakti is governed by that which is eternal, the results that we accrue, if you will, from practicing bhakti are also eternal. Now, they might not manifest all at once, but they're eternal. So, in other words, because of contact with bhakti, even in an animal life, then one will derive benefit. Or in a human life, in contact with bhakti, if one happens for one reason or another to take birth as an animal or a bird or something, as some of these examples that we're giving, that bhakti stays with them. That wouldn't happen if they were close to hatha yoga or jnana yoga, or where they were associated with other kind of sages, not themselves under the influence of bhakti. So there are many stories like this, many examples of this, and your question is not a silly question at all. And if we look carefully at it, we examine it, we have to come to this kind of conclusion that the power of bhakti is such that the results derived from associating, even in some instances unknowingly, with bhakti, are permanent, and they show up, and they may show up even in the less complex forms of life, in the ways in which we're talking about, but are nonetheless obvious to those who pay attention to such animals and their lifestyles and affinity for devotional atmosphere, devotees, prasadam, and so on and so forth. Thank you for your question.
There's a couple of nice comments in the chat. Chidahari says, the birds were said to have been there from the time of Sri Ram, the temple you mentioned. And then Kanaram says that in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishnadas Kaviraj says that even Sarvabhauma's dog is dear to Lord Chaitanya. So the next question is from Amrit Gopal, also from Brighton.
Hare Krishna, dear Vaishnavas, Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hello. Okay.
reading the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a verse and purport that has intrigued me. I think partially because I work in an atmosphere that is comprised of very opulent, very materially opulent people. But just the verse, the sense enjoyment of the demigods is somewhat disturbed, but the residents of the planets, the subterranean heavenly planets, they enjoy life without disturbances. Thus, they are understood to be very attached to illusory happiness. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada calls these fools, vimudhas, because they are engaged in material happiness, because it's temporary. They're candidates for the mercy of the Vaishnavas. So my question is that why is it that the illusory energy causes a soul to forget? Why is opulence sometimes the cause of forgetfulness? And the second part of that question is, how can I constantly remember this? Because I'm finding that even subtly, sometimes I see the opulence of these materially engrossed people. Sometimes I think it must be because they were pious in their previous life and they're experiencing the fruits now. But their forgetfulness, of course, how is it that they've forgotten?
Well, yes, I think that as Gita Bhagavad Gita says, Bhogaishvarya prasaktanam teaprichetasam. Buddhir samadhona vidhiyate. Bhogaishvarya, Bhoga, enjoyment, Aishvarya, opulence, Bhogaishvarya prasaktanam teaprichetasam. Vyavasayatmika buddhirekeha kurunandana. Such material facilities, if you will, comforts and so forth, obviously they tend to absorb us in, make us feel more comfortable, relatively speaking, in our material bodies, mitigate the distress of the material body to some extent, right? Which, when it's not mitigated, it serves as considerable negative impetus for finding a solution. They find the material opulence provides kind of a stopgap, a temporary solution of sorts to the natural built-in negative impetus of material nature, which makes us feel out of place and uncomfortable and in search for something more than what meets the eye and the mind. So that kind of third eye, if you will, is kind of closed down by material opulence and comfort. So the Gita says, so those who are too much attached to enjoyment and Aishvarya, samadhona vidhiyate, they cannot attain. They don't have the one-mindedness of focus that's required for attaining samadhi. So samadhona, they can't attain it. So there's two things being mentioned here. I mean, on the one hand, material opulence, bhoga, aishvarya, and its pursuit, if you will, causes the intellect to be, in the language of the Gita, many-branched, or the mind. Just like the modern society is really promoting, in many respects, the idea of material opulence being, the goal, right? If you have money, well, you're famous, right? And suddenly your opinion counts. And within the context of that material well-being, well, it's just endless. How many possibilities? If you want to pursue comfort through material well-being, well, there's no end to that, right? And this is the problem, today, largely, that there's just too many choices. There's just too many choices. It becomes disturbing to the mind, but and that's not conducive to the antithesis of that. I say the other side, the one-mindedness that's required for spiritual practice. So you can't I think that you can't expect to have knowledge while pursuing ignorance. Some people say, why don't I remember my previous life? Well, you might be able to, but you're going about it in a way that is not possible. Because we're pursuing, the antithesis of a spiritual life and underlying facts that I've had, many lives. Material life, we're born into ignorance. The very cause of our birth materially is not knowledge, it's ignorance. So how can you expect to have knowledge in the pursuit of ignorance? We can give you a theoretical and say, here's the theory. You're actually not this body. You had a previous life and a previous life and a previous life. So that's the theory, right? Now, why can't I remember it? Well, you can't remember it to the extent that you're pursuing the ignorance that repeated births arise out of. If you want to know, well, it's possible. And then you can, to begin with, you have to, so come to know the self. So know what the self is, and then you may know about your previous births, or you may think it's not that important. These are just passing, phases of that are superficial to what I am and so forth. Just to go on that for a second, why don't you remember your previous lives? Well, I wasn't trying to. I'm trying to concentrate on this life. In bringing an end to repeated birth and death. If you go to these, whatever, hypnotic regression sessions to find out what your previous birth is, you usually find that you were, an Egyptian king, or if you play it out, it doesn't make a lot of karmic sense if you were such and such, and how come you're, born in Britain in this family, I thought you were a Danish king previously, so, and everybody was, or whatever. I'm generalizing, but not in doing so, not giving a lot of credence to such, pursuits. If you want to pursue what you were in your previous life, why don't you pursue first what you are and the fact that you change lives? Anyway, so I'm speaking in a broader way, but I think it holds up. Yes, you can say that there was a piety in people's lives to have, if in this life, from the previous life, in this life, they're experiencing material opulences and so forth. I was once visiting with Chaitanya Goswami of the Radharaman Goswamis, and we were talking about a fellow who was a classmate of his and had become a spiritual teacher in the West, and he had adopted bhakti at a certain point, and he was getting a following and so forth. But he asked Chaitanya Goswami to come with him to the West because he didn't really know Gaudiya Vaishnavism. And so he wanted Chaitanya Goswami, who was learned, to give classes and so forth. And Chaitanya Goswami chuckled and said, he doesn't have any, he's doing this because he finds, Hare Krishna is popular, so I'll be that, and he did his own version of Krishna consciousness, but he wasn't really grounded in, initiated in, the sampradaya and so forth. But the man was fabulously wealthy and had a lot of followers and so forth. So Chaitanya Goswami chuckled and said, he doesn't have any knowledge. And he has all this piety that's bringing him this attention, money, and followers and so forth, and spending it all, in this life. What will the next life be? Was his query, appropriately so. So yeah, it's true that that's a little bit different, because he was, some type of a sadhu,
Es un
but
poquito
people
diferente
get material
porque
opulence and
este era un
from what
cierto
they've done
tipo
in
de
the past.
sabio,
So,
pero
why do they forget? Well,
volviendo
I've
a
given, a broader example.
tus
Why we
compañeros de
forget?
trabajo, la gente con la que trabajas,
What are you going to remember?
¿por qué uno se olvida?
Why do you forget at all your previous life? I've explained. So the same holds true for such people. And then you have to,
Bueno, porque todo el mundo se olvida su
you
vida
have to
anterior,
teach
no
them
solo los
that
ricos.
this is the teaching of the Veda. If you want material opulence, this is how you get it. But how you get it is
si
the opposite. You have to
material,
be pious. You have to be self-sacrificing, and so on and so forth. And it's the fruit of that. So it would appear in the world today that that's not necessarily the case. That you can get material opulence by cheating other people. You can get ahead by stepping on the heads of others and so on and so forth, which really does not result in it. The result that you're getting is actually due to your previous life. And because the way you're conducting yourself is such that will accrue the opposite. Well, in the next life. So this is just a microcosm of what we say, how macrocosmically this works. That if you very piously conduct yourself with the goal of attaining Swarga, the celestial realm, so that you can go there and live for eons, if you will. But then again, come down, right? Up and down. So in a microcosm of that, so people are doing that, and their heaven is, well, they may attain, a opulent situation in this world, but not understand where it comes from. We're there teaching theoretically and so forth, but it's hard to speak over the microphone of materialism and consumerism. Materialism as a philosophy, consumerism as a resultant way of life. If your philosophy is that there's nothing more to life than whatever you want to make out of it, and then that's a recipe for doing whatever's necessary to get material opulence, basically. So, as I say, the consumerism is largely driven by an overriding materialistic philosophical perspective that's the dominant paradigm philosophically in the world, even though most people aren't philosophical. Nonetheless, they're influenced by that and they conduct themselves accordingly. So I hope that helps. Okay, Hare Krishna. Another question?
I had a quick comment. It's interesting because you were saying, like, why don't people remember their past lives? It's because of ignorance and all that. So my nephew, actually, he's one of those kids.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so he's one of those kids who remembered his past life, but he has nothing to do with Krishna consciousness or spirituality. But he actively wanted to forget that he remembered it because it made him weird in the so-called normal. So even if you don't have the avidya covering your remembrance of your past life, the avidya tries to cover it even in this life, if you remember. And that was really interesting. And for me, it was like inconceivable that he didn't put it together, that if he remembers his past life, the person that he's right now is not his actual self. And he really, it was too much for him. But anyway, so the next question, the next question is from Krishna Chaitanya.
Hare Krishna.
We can hear you.
La siguiente pregunta.
My question is about the thing in the Bhajan Rahasya. And it's that part. Maybe I'll just read your translation of the part and then ask the question. One should next become mature in one's worship on the basis of the first four verses of the Shikshashtakam, before accepting one's spiritual body.
Antes de
fifth
aceptar
verse.
su
With this verse, one begins to take shelter of Srimati Radharani's lotus feet in the Siddhadeha and then make gradual progress. By the time one has reached the sixth verse, one's contaminations have pretty much disappeared, and one therefore has the right to worship in one's Siddhadeha. If anyone tries to meditate on his spiritual body without having this qualification, his intelligence will be turned upside down due to his lack of strength. So my question about this is,
debido a su falta de cualificación. Mi pregunta es,
what are some examples of trying to meditate on the spiritual body without having the qualification? And what are some things that could happen to someone who tries to do so? And let's say, okay, that happened and someone figures that out, then what's the course that one should take to
¿qué es lo que uno debería hacer?
Take care of that.
Well, I think that one of the things that I really appreciated amongst the Himalayan yogis, sadhus and so forth, is that when asked philosophical questions, their answers were what I would call
dice, una de las cosas que aprecio de los yogis en el Himalaya,
very, very basic, like you can't stay forever, everything's temporary.
Es que han entendido las cosas básicas, que uno no puede vivir por siempre,
The Atma is different from the body.
que el Atma es diferente del cuerpo,
not in the body is changing. I mean, these are very basic, they're not complicated.
Estas son nociones muy básicas, son gente corriente, pero para uno que ha sido involucrado en el Vaishnavismo Gaudiya durante años no es nada especial.
The emphasis on practice and putting into practice these basic
Pero el énfasis que tienen en poner en práctica estas enseñanzas tan básicas es algo tan correcto, si quieren, y tan poderoso.
The fact of the matter is that many theological arguments, which are very interesting, stimulating in a way,
y la realidad es que muchos hechos teóricos, muchos filósofos no tienen el poder de entregarse a estas prácticas. Están fascinados por la filosofía, pero no lo quieren o no lo pueden poner en práctica. Por eso que Prabhupada, cuando le preguntaban preguntas muy filosóficas sobre el mundo espiritual, él contestaba simplemente con ¿por qué no vas allí y lo descubres tú mismo? Porque quería subrayar la importancia de la experiencia. Yo no quiero contestarte de forma que satisfaga tu intelecto.
We have to tame it, and we have to feed the soul, not the intellect. We have to again use our head as
Tenemos que alimentar el alma, no el intelecto.
So to give all of your energy.
Entonces poner toda la energía de uno en enseñanzas tan básicas como que no soy el cuerpo y ponerlo en práctica es muy poderoso.
Affording of experiential spirituality way more than studying a book and learning,
mucho más poderoso que aprenderlo todo en un libro.
For example, through the devotees who are the extension of himself because they have experience of suffering. He doesn't have experience of suffering because that would mean he was in ignorance. Therefore, because he doesn't have experience, he doesn't have the empathy. His compassion is only reserved for the devotees who are within the influence of the Swarup Shakti. This is a complicated theological argument.
Por ejemplo, el hecho de que un devoto es la expresión de la compasión del Señor y muchas cosas. Estos son hechos teóricos.
It's useful to a point only.
Que son útiles hasta un cierto punto. Y lo que encontramos
in the Bhaktivinoda Parivar,
en el Bhaktivinoda Parivara, ahí estás citando Bhaktivinoda Thakur y el Bhajan Rahasya,
which is kind of a commentary on Shikshastakam.
Que es un comentario al Shikshastakam.
But the Bhajan Rahasya is another one. And there we find this, and we find further that
ahí encontramos, y también más allá, encontramos pruebas de Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Encontramos las pruebas en Bhaktisiddhanta, que ni siquiera dejaba a sus discípulos que leyeran algunas partes del Chaitanya Charitamrita. Por ejemplo, el Antya Lila no lo podían leer. Prefería que leyeran el Chaitanya Bhagavatam, el Chaitanya Charitamrita. Pero esto era no para impedir su participación, sino para que se enfocaron en la práctica. Esta es una característica de nuestro parivar. Algunos miembros, discípulos de Prabhupada, inclusive, escuchan cosas que Prabhupada no enseñaba, por ejemplo, sobre el Siddhadeha. Se sienten como que, ay, mi gurú no me dio un Siddhadeha. Y aquí hay un Baba que acabo de encontrar y me da todos esos detalles. Entonces, esto es como uno llega al Raga Bhakti y luego recibe un Siddhadeha. Hay que servir a Krishna en meditación con el propio Siddhadeha, y Prabhupada no me dio nada de eso. Entonces, no me lo dio todo. Y el Parampara está interrumpido, o sea, este Bhaktisiddhanta, donde se encuentra la carta que dice que él recibió iniciación. Hay discípulos de Prabhupada que escucharon estas cosas y se sienten como que les falta algo, que no leyeron todo lo que hay, que es necesario. Y si le preguntas a estos sad en el Himalaya, le preguntas importante, ellos dicen el mantra civil de Guru.
And the means that the reality about him will come to light is through the utterance of meditation on
toda la realidad Gopala, el mantra de nuestra es el Gopal mantra, se va a manifestar conforme vayamos realizando, repitiendo este mantra. El Gopal Tapani se encuentra entre este mantra, en el Brahma Samhita, y uno así, siguiendo repetición, va a realizar lo que es Krishna. Y nosotros también damos mantra, o sea, los santos nombres. Todo el mundo espiritual está en el mantra y en el nombre de Krishna. Los asociados, su forma,
and so forth. So the emphasis of Bhaktivinoda and Bhaktisiddhanta, more so even, taking the lead from Bhaktivinoda Thakur, was
entonces el énfasis de Bhaktivinoda y aún más Bhaktisiddhanta era más el Nama Sankirtana y también mantra dhyana.
There's any number of examples that you could cite. Gopal Kumar.
Hay muchos ejemplos, como por ejemplo, dice Sanat Swami, él recibió mantra y nama. Al final, donde el mantra solo con el nama entró en Goloka.
So there are so many examples of this.
Hay tantos ejemplos.
And so Bhaktivinoda Thakur, his emphasis, and appropriately so, was, well, we should practice, but we have to practice relative to our adhikar. So some practices
Bhaktivinoda Thakur nos dice, tenemos que practicar, pero no nuestro
adhikar for, and have eligibility for. And so until the eligibility comes, then
entonces que nos llegue esta acción, tenemos que comportarnos de forma diferente.
He did preaching widely, and as a result of that, he was drawn into this meditative life that we find in the Antya Lila, internal life, where he could no longer be a public person.
Otro ejemplo.
He wasn't capable of being a public person anymore because of how he conducted himself in the public sphere.
De uno que a través de su se quedó incapaz de comportarse dentro de la sociedad.
And example of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the Antya-lila would be really to skip over everything that's
Pero nosotros comportáramos como Chaitanya Mahaprabhu durante el lila, al final de su...
He is, after all, Krishna in his Acharya Lila.
No lo lograríamos y no lo diríamos. Después de todo, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu es Krishna en su Alila. O sea, él nos enseñó a través de su ejemplo.
As he spoke with Rupa and Sanatan, and converted Sarvabhauma and so forth.
Enseñanzas se encuentran en la forma en que Rupa, Sanatan, Sarvabhauma. Él estaba dando las enseñanzas y comportándose de forma de una forma que su empezó a desarrollarse y su interior empezó a desarrollarse.
You need to have the taste for that, because if it's not driven by a taste, you won't be able to keep it up.
Bhaktivinoda Thakur dice que si queremos meditar en nuestro Siddha, tenemos que tener un gusto, tener atracción para eso, si no, no vamos a
using your sadhaka deha and applying it in such a way that it will result in the natural arising of a siddha deha and the meditation upon it and so forth. So in our paribar, then we want to give a theoretical understanding of this, but emphasize the practices by which this can come about. Our gurus don't come and give us a siddha day and say, here's your siddha day, and by the way,
nuestro parivar queremos subrayar la importancia de la práctica. Vamos a dar el siddha deha. Acá vamos a decirle, ese es tu cuerpo espiritual, la práctica. No le vamos a decir
this should be your sadhana. There are people that do that.
Lo que sería sadhana de forma interior, lo que es su sitio en el Nitya Lila.
It is it's by and large, or to a large extent, my experience is it's not resulting in
es que
that which it's supposed to result in, and often results in something that is undesirable. So that was experienced by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Many people were giving siddha deha and saying that, you have to get from
causa el resultado opuesto y no queremos.
And then those gurus would be supported by the disciples and so forth. And oftentimes their character was not good. Gaudiya Vaishnavism was not something at the time of Bhaktivinoda that pious Hindus were giving much attention to.
En el tiempo de Bhaktivinoda,
because of the abuse in the name of praying.
Hindúes piadosos hacían mucho caso a las enseñanzas de Bhaktivinoda Thakur.
And there was a lot of immorality.
Había mucha en el nombre del Vaishnavismo Gaudiya.
Bhajan, actual
bhajan
going on in some places.
Había sadhus que hacían raja con otras mujeres.
They sought to make an adjustment in their focus that we could get extraordinary results, like
entonces Bhaktivinoda
Thakur
trató de ajustar para que el resultado tenga mi Srila Prabhupada.
Well, I was reading it, something.
Oí otro día que
that he said that yes, that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu predicted that the holy name will go to every town and village, and that was done, I think, around 1965. Someone did that, but now Rag Bhakti, now that has not been given. That must be given.
Chaitanya Mahaprabhu dijo que su nombre se oiría en todas las aldeas, y esto sí se hizo en 1965 de Prabhupada, pero el Raga Bhakti ahora es de distribuir el Raga Bhakti, eso no, y yo me puse a reír.
What kind of self-sacrifice Prabhupada embodied to, bring that about? What kind of Vaishnava he was, that
el tipo de Vaishnava que era Prabhupada,
chant Hare Krishna, just
que hizo de manera gente que ni siquiera la había encontrado, se pusiese a cantar Hare Krishna.
It's super extraordinary.
Es extraordinario lo que hizo y que tenía.
To fulfill that prophecy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to think that, oh yeah, somebody did that in 1965. What did they do? What did that?
Decir
what kind of power
que
did that take? Krishna Shakti Vinenai. Prabhupada.
Que Prabhupada
without Krishna Shakti,
el Raga Bhakti,
no one can effectively, Chaitanya Charitamrita says, spread Sankirtan.
Chaitanya Charitamrita dice que sin este Shakti nadie puede distribuir el Sankirtan.
So what is that Shakti?
Entonces, por supuesto que Prabhupada tenía ese tipo de Shakti, o sea, es un comentario muy estúpido.
In the name of, following Rupa Goswami or Haridas Thakur, bhajan, this is what it's really about. Bhajan, live on the bank of Radhakund.
Tengo el micrófono que se desconecta, no sé.
And chant Hare Krishna, and this is right there. That's the essence of all the teachings. So we should all run over there and so forth. Well, there's 11 or so teachings in that book, Upadeshamrita.
En el Upadeshamrita hay como 11 enseñanzas.
There's a progression that's going on there.
Si las aprendemos,
jump there
vemos que hay una progresión.
Has often resulted in giving Gaudiya Vaishnavism a bad name. It has resulted in cheapening this
Muchas
ideal.
Veces,
some of the Godbrothers that I mentioned who left Prabhupada.
Estos hermanos espirituales que dejaron a Prabhupada por ese tipo de ideal.
The ones that I know mostly became,
la mayoría de esos se convirtieron en académicos.
First become devotee, then become scholar.
Prabhupada le dijo a su discípulo Nitai, primero hazte devoto y después académico. Y él dijo, ¿por qué no puedes ser académico y devoto al mismo tiempo? Pues ahí tienes el ejemplo. Ahora se quedó como académico nada más y ya.
Identification with it and so forth, but Prabhupada's instruction to him was very pertinent.
Pero la instrucción de Prabhupada fue muy correcta.
There are others too. So
hay otros también.
You have Jagadananda, Pandu, and what was his name?
Pandu.
Hiranyagarbha, Pandu, and Nadia.
Y Nadia, 3 discípulos de Prabhupada que dejaron la misión de Prabhupada y se hicieron seguidores de Lalita Prasad. Nadie sabe dónde está. Pandu es un Gauranagari que Bhaktivinoda mismo condenó. Hiranyagarbha ahora está influenciado por los Sahajas. Y acabó en la universidad, se hizo académico muchos años después. Tuvo la ocasión de leer un manuscrito de Tato Sandarbha, se puso en contacto conmigo y lo ayudé hasta que pude para que se quedase involucrado con el Vaishnavismo Gaudiya. Pero la idea original que lo sacó del movimiento de Prabhupada era esta, de que hay algo que falta aquí. Pero todavía no lo ha logrado. Han pasado muchos años y
people leave the Paribar of Bhaktivinoda
Mucha gente deja el
largely
parivar de Bhaktivinoda
due
Thakur,
to
principalmente
ISKCON
debido
is in
a
that Paribar.
como el ISKCON se encuentra en este
Whether they use that
parivar,
term or not, and they, they're the largest
que lo
group,
sepan o no,
and
que usan esta
they've
palabra o
had
no,
some
parivar.
problems with spiritual authority, kind of commanding the faith of others and compelling them. And so, some people have left
Y algunos
and
dejaron
gone to these other sectors where the Siddha Pranali is given
la ISKCON para irse a otros sectores donde se da el Siddha Pranali.
Without that kind of adhikar that we're talking about. Sorry.
A gente que no está cualificada.
And then they become the best disciples.
Y luego
of that,
ellos se
guru,
convierten
nobody knew
en
about
los
previously, and now they want to take
mejores
them to the West and
discípulos
take them with his words and
de este guru que nadie conocía hasta el otro día y los quieren llevar al occidente para que predique. Pero todo esto son residuos de la campaña de prédica de Bhaktivinoda Thakur y de Prabhupada,
one
etc.
applies oneself, it should result in now you can misapply yourself in the name of preaching too, and that there's plenty of examples of that. So there has to be a corrective, to that side. But anyway, all things in time and with eligibility.
Pero con el tiempo se va desarrollando la cualificación de cada uno y espero que esto te contestó a tu pregunta. Gracias.
Okay, the last question it's all the way from Minneapolis.
La última
it's
pregunta es de Minneapolis.
Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Is this if my obeisances? Are you able to hear me?
¿Me
Can't hear you,
escuchas?
can see you.
Sí, te escucho y te veo.
Effulgent.
Muy fulgente.
Parmanand, if you go to the English, if you click on at the bottom, it says, I think it says interpretation or English or something like that. If you choose English there, it should be okay.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Ahora sí me escuchas. Antes no lo escuchaba.
So my question is in relation to
Mi pregunta es en relación a lo que leí
canto, 9th chapter
en el canto 2, capítulo 9 del
Bhagavatam, Lord
Bhagavatam,
Brahma is surrendering
donde vemos al
the
Señor
Lord's
Brahma
instruction. And when Lord Brahma is telling Narada, he says that he's instructing Narada on this, what he heard from the Lord, because of Narada's submission to him. And
no entendí,
we
está
see
hablando
this is
de
emphasized
Brahma,
by
ahora habla de
Srila
Narada.
Prabhupada, that when we approach the Guru, surrender has to be there. So my question is, what is being surrendered? Because
cuando uno se entrega, ¿qué es lo que entrega? Porque a veces decimos que Guru Maharaj es muy liberal, conservador, y nosotros todo lo que diga Guru Maharaj, pero no parece ser correcto. Por ejemplo, por lo menos
but at the same time, Guru Maharaj might also give us instructions on
muchas veces el Guru nos da instrucciones sobre cosas prácticas que estemos haciendo para poder hacer para avanzar espiritualmente. Entonces, eso también viene a entregarse. Entonces, ¿qué es lo que uno entrega?
Right. Thank you for your question. Well, we've spoken about this at length, and it's worth repeating.
Gracias por tu pregunta. Hablamos muchas veces de esto, merece repetirlo.
What gives one eligibility to tread the path of bhakti is shraddha.
Lo que da a uno la cualificación para caminar el sendero del bhakti, shraddha.
We need faith to traverse any path. We need to believe that there's going to be a result.
Necesitamos fe para cualquier sendero, para cosa.
Take up the task. But with regard to other spiritual
pero los senderos espirituales como el llano, el yoga, ahí hace mucho más que la fe. Pero en el bhakti solo la fe, conforme uno va aplicando, se cualifica así más para adoptar otros. No es que uno tenga que ser en todos los senderos, pero por ejemplo, uno puede dar con más éxito porque su limpiada
material desires, because
y se encuentra de
they'll just
deseos
distract you.
materiales,
Your mind will be
materiales.
focused on them, right? So it's very practical. So faith is the eligibility. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur very wisely has said that
La fe nos cualifica. Bhakti
is a
Thakur dice que
scriptural argument.
fe
That's
quiere
true, but that's
decir
not
fe
the whole
en las
definition
escrituras.
of faith. The whole definition of faith is Sharanagati, is the application
Pero
of
la
oneself
definición con
in
fe
relation
es
to the
Sharanagati.
spiritual argument.
Cuando uno llega a sí mismo,
Scriptural
tras haber leído
argument is there.
los temas de la que nos proponen las escrituras, pues,
What are you? What is matter?
cuando uno tiene samyana, que soy yo, que es Dios,
faith that if I want to arrive at perfect knowing, I have to have a perfect method.
La fe que quiero llegar a un destino perfecto, hace falta un método perfecto.
Of functioning in ignorance. They're imperfect. That doesn't mean they don't perfectly work in some respects, but in terms of giving comprehensive knowledge, they're imperfect. So with my eyes, I can see perfectly.
Vemos medios
20/20 vision
que son imperfectos. Por ejemplo, con mis ojos puedo ver.
It's objective.
Poner una visión perfecta.
The totality of my material instruments, mind, senses, intellect.
La totalidad de mis sentidos materiales.
How I apply myself to them.
Por mucho que los aplique, no voy a llegar al conocimiento perfecto. Entonces el método perfecto es ver que el mundo, la realidad es más grande que yo.
So, if God wants me to know, I can know. If the infinite wants to reveal
Entonces,
itself
que sepa, voy a saber. Si el infinito quiere revelar al
finite can do what it could not do on its own. So this is just
lo voy a
basic,
poder conocer. Este es
math, if you will,
es la matemática básica, si quieres, de la revelación.
Our argument for the need for revelation to arrive at comprehensive knowing. We've seen for as long as human existence has been
Vemos
around,
que
people have been trying to arrive at perfect knowledge.
Durante toda su vida, el hombre ha de llegar al conocimiento perfecto.
And the only people that we could remotely
los únicos
the only people that we could consider
que consideramos
perfect happiness,
que ahora
because they have perfect happiness,
llegaron a la felicidad perfecta,
sages and rishis
son muy poquísimos
satisfied
y rishis están satisfechos de nada, tienen nada.
I mean, they do stand out if we look at carefully,
como que sobresale si analizamos bien.
They're driving fulfillment in a way that exceeds all of the efforts to arrive at fulfillment and happiness, and the knowledge that requires, the knowledge and the consequent action that follows, put together. You put all that
una
together,
satisfacción mayor, que es mayor de la satisfacción a la que llegaría alguien
we can't understand their happiness,
esforzándose de otras formas.
Some problem in their brain that they don't need to eat as much or whatever, and they can sit
no es que no comen porque tienen algún problema en el cerebro. O sea, su vida es un testimonio que nos dice a través de las culturas, que sean sufis, que sean sadhus, que estás.
And so forth. They're tapping into the perennial, if you will, philosophy experientially and reporting on
enchufados
in a basic way.
En lo perenne, en esta corriente.
They may differ on.
Los detalles pueden ser diferentes, sendero que hayan adoptado.
So we have faith.
Entonces necesitamos que es conocimiento perfecto. Y el método perfecto es juntando los en Sharanagati y abandonando, rechazando, dejando de tratar seguir cosas con la fuerza de facultades materiales, sino hacer lo opuesto, la acción opuesta. Usamos nuestras facultades materiales para ir hacia lo. Entonces, Bhaktivinoda Thakur justamente dice que la fe está definida como fe en las escrituras, pero no es toda la historia completa, es aplicar enseñanzas de las escrituras. Y volvemos a los temas básicos en el Himalaya. Y se llama Sharanagati. Sharanagati en sí mismo es una bhakti, según Swami, pero Bhakti Thakur lo enfatizó más. Porque vemos que en el Ramanuja Sampradaya se ve que no tiene ninguna otra ocasión puede quedarse en Sharanagati. Si no tienen ya, si no tienen. Sharanagati tiene seis partes.
So it's sixfold. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur has written several songs for each limb of Sharanagati that one can sing, learn, and in that long for, pine for, aspire for that limb of Sharanagati to become part of my very life. And so the culture is a culture of Sharanagati.
La del Sharanagati es una cultura, una cultivación, y se acepta que sea favorable, rechazando lo que no es favorable para el Bhakti.
So, its core is said to be that Krishna is my protector, Krishna is my maintainer.
Con una sensación de que Krishna es mi protector,
so to put these things
que me mantiene, entonces poner esas cosas en práctica,
than for a householder.
Prácticamente se va a hacer de formas diferentes para un monje.
But the way it will go about
de forma diferente.
Different. A householder needs some income for the family.
Un deudor necesita ingresos.
He or she has extra, what do they call it, disposable income. They should dispose
y cualquier dinero extra deberían darlo a una causa igual. Los yogis echen dinero al Ganges, nosotros decimos, echen su dinero a los devotos y para que usen en el servicio de Krishna.
So again, a householder or a person earning will apply themselves slightly differently, but the principle
un devoto casado que estando dinero se va a portar de forma diferente, dando donaciones.
Get up and scrabble and pick up the fruits that have fallen from the trees and the roots in the ground, and he has to make some effort, right? So
y hasta el sadhu que vive ruta recoge suelo y de raíces que encuentre también tiene que hacer esfuerzos. Pero el principio es el mismo.
So we should study Sharanagati and try to apply ourselves to what it means.
Entonces deberías estudiar el Sharanagati y aplicarte.
The Guru is teaching. The Guru is teaching.
Eso es lo que enseña el Guru. Que
giving faith, sharing his experience,
nos da fe, compartir experiencia que es contagiosa. Entonces, pues, aprovechamos de esta fe, tenemos nosotros también fe en Krishna Bhakti, y así tenemos el a través del cual nuestro Bhakti
in touch and the contagious effect has captured our faith, and so
el Guru ha capturado nuestra fe. Vemos el ejemplo del Guru, así como él aplica el Sharanagati, nosotros deberíamos hacer. Podamos para practicar,
and so on. So,
etcétera.
And of course, if you get specific instructions,
por supuesto, si reciben instrucciones específicas,
that's another thing. Then
esa es otra cosa.
Then they should do that.
Entonces deberían hacer eso. Prabhupada prácticamente dijo que todo el éxito de su vida entera fue seguir las instrucciones de su guru, que en realidad son herencia. Su guru le dijo, deberías practicar en inglés, pero él lo tomó tan serio. Al final logró para Estados Unidos, empezó a enviar libros, nos ayudamos mucho con eso, la circulación de libros y todo. El guru tiene una misión, como nosotros tenemos una sangha, y tengo cosas que me gustaría hacer para los miembros. Los miembros tienen que participar. Necesito que los miembros de mi misión participen.
And it requires funding and so forth for those who are not living,
ocupamos
in an ashram. So this is kind of a practical way of speaking about it.
Económicos para los que viven en el ashram. El guru tiene su posición, personalidad, puede ser conservador, puede ser más liberal.
And conservative perspectives that
tengo las dos. Por algunas cosas son buenas, por algunas son muy conservadoras.
Neither am I a flaky person. So there could be extremes on either side, right?
De haber extremos en las dos disposiciones.
Just demonstrating that these worldly perspectives have their limitations. Well, we should,
Pero bueno, en este mundo cualquier perspectiva tiene sus limitaciones. Al fin y al cabo debemos dejar. Hubo un tiempo en Estados Unidos donde los cristianos, la derecha cristiana, que muchos votadores no estaban involucrados con la política para nada. No les interesaba. Mucho mejor para ellos actualmente.
Now, some devotees, it depends how. I mean, this is the Nivritti mark. We're living in the world.
Es el Nivritti mark. Nosotros vivimos en el mundo. No todo el mundo tiene las cualificaciones para abandonarlo todo. Entonces, en la medida en que están involucrados mundo,
than others.
Algunas
there may be times in the world where it looms large for all of us, its conditions, and we have to pay attention to it. Like if there's a nuclear war, we might have to pay attention to it.
Hay unas condiciones que nos involucran a todos. Una guerra nuclear, todo el mundo va a presionar eso. Pero no sabemos que todo va a pasar.
It's going to go on, and it's the same thing going on over and over again. It's the transformation of the modes of nature.
Todo va a ocurrir, no lo vamos a dejar detrás y todo va a seguir.
Starts with understanding the Atma as Nitya Krishna Das and applying ourselves accordingly. So, I mean, yeah, Sharanagati is
lo importante es que conozcamos como un servidor eterno Atma, que es un servidor eterno de Krishna.
Definition. It may extend, as I say, to apply to Guru gives you instruction. Then, personally, you should feel blessed by that. Try to take that.
Entonces, fe quiere decir Sharanagati, abandonar las oraciones del Guru en general, instrucción particular, sino las
then he may reconsider and adjust and so forth. But my instruction to all of you,
instrucción a todos ustedes, es de hacer su propio sadhana, aplicarse en Sharanagati, seguir las prácticas del Bhakti y ayudar prácticamente, si hay maneras en que pueden involucrar con sus energías o financieramente. hacer
It's for you. It's your project.
el proyecto de ustedes.
That should be your fun.
Deberían identificarse con este proyecto como si fuera el de ustedes. ¿Está bien?
Yes, Maharaj, thank you.
Sí, Maharaj, gracias.
Very, very nice to hear your voice. I think that's the first time I've heard
Me
your voice.
haber escuchado tu voz, creo que es la
nice voice.
Muy bonita voz, bonita voz.
I see you have a nice library behind you.
Veo que también tienen
una
librería muy bonita.
Okay. Haribol.
Haribol.
So that's about all the time we have.
No pasamos el tiempo.
For today, appreciate the questions.
Por hoy, gracias por las preguntas. Y nos vemos semana que viene.
Just a quick announcement to everybody. This coming Thursday, Muralidhar is going to be giving a class on Madhurya Kadambini on this same channel here. And